Hello, I'm Kats, and welcome to today's video. So by popular demand, we are doing a follow-up to my shard tracking video where we tracked my shard pluses and minuses for 2 months, and this is going to be the tome tracking video. So I asked you guys if you wanted me to do this, track my legendary and mythical tome gains and acquisitions for 2 months, and there was a resounding yes in response to that. So here we are with the results of 2 months of tracking my tomes. So the point of this video is to show you guys what an endgame free-to-play tome acquisition can look like and highlight the areas that have yielded the most over time. So without further ado, let's hop right into the data here. So we have on the screen the tome log, which is actually in the exact same spreadsheet as the shard log. So I will link this spreadsheet in the description box down below if you'd like to check it out for yourself. This is a fixed snapshot in time and I won't be updating this in the future, but nonetheless it will provide you with some of the context for the information we're going to be sharing today. But as you can see here, it's a lot less populated, thankfully, than the shard log, just because it's a lot more uncommon to get legendary and especially mythical tomes. But as you can see here, we have the entries for February and we have the entries for March. And if I unhide the columns here, we can take a look at all the different sources from which I was able to secure some of these tomes. Starting off with the kind of the most obvious thing, obviously, you know, I do use tomes in the end game, but probably not as much as you might think. That's just a product of me being in the end game and not always having champions to build. And so a handful of legendary tomes each of the months and a decent amount of mythical tomes for each of the months. And the point of this is just to make sure that the running totals here are correct throughout the entire duration of the tracking portion. But yeah, diving into the sources, we have the shop, which is just like every once in a while they'll give us some sort of reward pack or something from the shop, and so just accounting for that. I think this one is Valentine's Day, and then this one was like the anniversary day or days, so one of those reward packs. Missions, if you happen to get some from the missions, you're progressing towards Arbiter or Ramontu or Marius. Sometimes along the way you're going to get some legendary tomes. I didn't happen to get any in that case. The quests, the advanced quests, you're going to get one. You're going to work your way up to one legendary tome every month, and that is categorized there. Clan shop, if you get lucky, or if we get lucky, you can have a legendary tome in the clan shop, and we had 2 in February but 0 in March. That's just pure RNG for those number of weeks. CVC, this depends on your tier, of course, but you can secure, I think tier 6 can get you a legendary tome for getting the milestone, 5.4 million in tier 6. Tournaments and events, of course, as you might, that's probably one of the most popular areas where they're offered typically in champion training events and or tournaments, and you can grind out some champion training and get yourself some tomes. I do try to focus on those as much as possible. We'll come back to that a bit later. Live Arena, I think one of the more recent milestones that I passed through, progressing from gold 3 into gold or towards gold 4, happened to have a legendary tome, so I made sure to document that one there. The Bazaar, of course, you do have one legendary tome up for grabs every single month, so we do have the one for each of those for each of the months. Demon Lord, Clan Boss, of course, Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare are the only places where you can get legendary tier tomes, and we'll come back to that one as well later. Hydra Clash, if you place in first, second, or third, you do have a chance to get some mythical tomes. That definitely came in clutch for me. Got sets of 2 for placing first in one and second in the other. Obviously, my clan is not a super whale clan. We're not super, I mean, we are endgame, but we're not a super whale clan, super spenders or anything like that. So we definitely lose Hydra Clash a good amount of the time. But every once in a while, you know, I guess in this case, you know, once or twice for each month, we did actually manage to pull off a win, so to speak, and I was able to get some tomes from that. And then Doom Tower Hard, you're guaranteed to get 2 legendary tomes if you can complete it fully. Doom Tower Normal doesn't really offer any. And then the Cursed City, I happened to get one, I think, from one of the milestone rewards along the bottom, or maybe from the chest, I forget exactly, but one did pop out, one legendary tome did pop out of the Cursed City. So to expound a bit further, the highlighted zones are the ones most likely to provide a consistent source of legendary and or mythical tomes. And let's dive into Demon Lord Clan Boss first. Of course, Ultra Nightmare and Nightmare are the only ones that will give you legendary tier tomes, and obviously you do have to be getting the highest chest in there with those respective difficulties. On average, if you were doing Ultra Nightmare getting the top chest, you should expect to see around 6 legendary tomes per month, and for Nightmare it's around 4 per month. So for taking a look at what we managed to get for February and March, obviously February is a little bit under relative to Ultra Nightmare. Granted, February is only 28 days and I'm assuming around 30 days, the average amount of days in a month. But we kind of made up for it with March kind of overshooting the 6 average, so we got 9 there for a grand total of 13, which is a little bit higher than the average combined for the sake of a month. And then Nightmare, we kind of undershot it a little bit across both of the months for a total of 6. But, you know, getting 3 out of 4 on average per month is basically on par from, you know, such a small sample size of only 2 months. So pretty consistent there, which is kind of the main takeaway. And this is exactly why you'll hear myself and other content creators harp about when you're in the early game, progressing into the mid game, you do want to make sure that Demon Lord Clan Boss is your highest priority, because not only is it a good source for getting shards, it is also one of the best places to start bankrolling yourself with some legendary tomes. The other thing to point out here is tournaments and events. Like I hinted at before, I typically max out every single champion training event and tournament there is, especially when they do offer some good rewards, particularly legendary and or mythical skill tomes. And that is most certainly reflected here with a good amount of the rewards here, basically on par with like Nightmare level of Demon Lord Clan Boss from the events and the tournaments. However, on the flip side, I do also have to acknowledge that some of the like legendaries and mythical tomes have come from shard pulling events, those champion chases, typically ones where I can pull a bit more shards because I do happen to have an abundance of them, like 2x Ancients. I can go a bit harder and stuff like that. And obviously it's proportional to how lucky you are. But if you pull enough shards, then, you know, you're just going to get enough points on average overall, particularly if you get a lot of epics. And so just to be transparent here, I wouldn't say that you're necessarily going to get, you know, 1, 2, 3-ish mythical tomes over the course of 2 months, unless you have an abundance of shards like myself and you're able to use them strategically to get yourself some of those rewards from champion chases. And then typically when they are running Titan events, which I categorize as an event in this case, they do typically offer a mythical tome kind of near the end, close to the end of milestone 5. So I typically go all the way out there if possible, just to make sure that I can get myself that 1 mythical tome. Now, despite all of this, there are actually some tournaments and events that I don't try to max out because they're just too costly, despite them potentially offering legendary and mythical tomes. And the ones that come to mind are typically summon rushes. You'd have to pull a significant amount of whatever shard type you'd like, and then you can start to get like the 3rd, 4th row tier is going to have some mythical tomes, maybe some legendary tomes up for grabs, but those are extremely costly. Again, you'd have to pull probably the equivalent of 10-ish plush sacreds in one go, or the equivalent, to get out there. And so that's just typically not, it's not sustainable for one, but it's typically not what I opt to do. Every once in a while though, you'll have some rogue Dungeon Divers event that's like 5,000 points 4 days, and you can, or 3 days 5,000 points, and you can get yourself a legendary tome. But again, that's just kind of hard to do unless you're just boat rolling a bunch of energy and or gems. And then the last event that comes to mind are Heroes Paths, just because typically you have some soul that you're chasing, or you have Titan event points that you're chasing, or something that's more enticing than going for the legendary and or mythical tomes. And those tend to be expensive in general, regardless of what the source of the points is. It's either a ridiculous amount of champion training, a negligible amount of Dungeon Divers, or it's just a lot of soul stones and or pulling shards, which can just make it very costly to participate in them. Plus, it would make it even more costly to participate in whatever the primary goal is, i.e. a soul or a champion or something other like that, and then also trying to go on a completely different path to secure a mythical tome. That is an option, and I typically highlight those in my free-to-play reviews of all of the heroes paths, but I find that most people, myself included, don't actually pursue the tomes in those types of events because there's other things to focus on that are arguably more important. So all of this adds up together into what I'm calling the positive sum, which just means how many we actually gained over this time period. You can kind of ignore the net because, again, this is just me booking champions, and that's not, that's not an indicative of anything relative to the sources. That just happens to be how many I spent over the course of the 2 months. But if that's interesting to you, then that data is there. But again, that's just a product of me being in the end game, and I typically don't have that many legendaries to book at this point because a lot of the ones that I use are already booked, of course. So positive sum is what we want to highlight here, and you can see here the grand total for February was 21 legendary tomes and 4 mythical tomes, and then March pretty much the same, 24 legendary tomes, a little bit higher of course, and then 4 on the mythical tomes as well. So I think the main takeaway here is that if you're truly min-maxing like myself, then you can probably net, over 20 legendary tomes every single month. But if you're more just like the mid-late game, maybe progressing towards the end game, you're not maxing out every single champion training event, that's fine. Then you'd probably be closer to around 15 legendary tomes per month. Again, assuming that you are doing the max chest on Demon Lord, Ultra Nightmare, and Nightmare Clan Boss. The good thing is most legendaries nowadays take anywhere between 10 and 15 books. So on average, if you're still in the progression stage, that means you should be able to book a new legendary that you happen to have acquired every single month or so. And eventually you start to reach a point where, like I said for myself, most of my legendaries that I use are booked. And that is why you can see here that I have a massive surplus of legendary tomes, just kind of waiting for more champions to pop up for me to book in the future. But yeah, I'm sitting on basically a stockpile of around 80 legendary tomes just because I am in the end game. And however, you can see that mythical tomes definitely come and go. They are a lot harder to come by, and I've just been using them because I happen to be relatively fortunate with the amount of mythicals that I have. But nonetheless, in terms of the mythical tomes, those are definitely harder to come by, and basically I'd have 2 a month if it wasn't even for the fact that we happen to do fairly well in a couple of Hydro Clashes. So if you're constantly losing Hydro Clash and then you're not really min-maxing the rare events and tournaments that happen to feature them, then you're really not going to be getting that many mythical tomes at all. So it's definitely a more end game thing for sure. You do kind of have to be min-maxing it, and you do have to be relatively competitive on whatever your tier is of Hydro Clash. All right, so that brings us to the end of my tome tracking journey for the past couple of months. And like I mentioned earlier, this spreadsheet will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like to take a deeper or a closer look at some of the details of the results. As I mentioned before, if you did want to also take a look at the shard variation of this, that is also in the exact same spreadsheet, which will be linked. And like I said, these are going to be static. I'm not going to update them in the future because they are snapshots in time of the acquisition of the resources over those time spans. I don't think there are any more resources that would be of interest to track, but let me know if you guys have any ideas or any other things you'd like to see in the comment section down below. Hopefully you did find this breakdown helpful and or insightful, and maybe I highlighted a couple of errors that you didn't think would actually produce the most amount of tomes. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future if you are enjoying the content overall on the channel. Thanks for watching and have a good one.